Hey everybody, it's Jacob here, and in this video we're going to be going over testing on DappStarter. So this might be crazy, but this is our last video on our introduction to DappStarter. So this whole week you've been learning a bunch about DappStarter, the UI harness, the DappLib, the contracts, so much stuff. And our goal was to try and help convince you that DappStarter is a really helpful platform that can help you get started in your Dapp development much quicker than you would if you had to set up the Flow CLI and install all your dependencies on your own and do a bunch of stuff with the FCL library. So for our last video here, we're going to be showing you how you can utilize the tests that come with DappStarter right off the bat that can help you in your development process. So in order to go to tests, you're going to click Packages, DappLib, tests, and fast Floward tests. Now, what you'll see in this file is a bunch of JavaScript, right? You'll see describe, you'll see before, describe, all this stuff. You don't have to worry about all the JavaScript. What you really have to worry about is these it functions. And all this is doing is, making an individual test for each scenario that we've laid out here. So for example, this first test says sets up two accounts. And you can see that, we're creating data using this object, and we're passing them directly into our DappLib. And we do that by saying await DappLib.kibble setup account. And what this is going to do is pass in data directly to our DappLib, set up the account, and then if there's no errors, this test will pass. Similarly, let's go to the next test. This says it mints kibble into the admin account and has the correct balance in the account. Now we set up two test objects, and I'll explain why and how we do this in a second. We're going to call kibble mint tokens. Then we're going to call kibble get balance and kibble get supply, which are both scripts, and store the result in a res1 and res2 variable, and check to make sure that that's what we expect. And so I hope you can begin to see how this testing, it's not too difficult, and it'll help you, try and test your transactions and scripts and your DappLib at the same time without having to use the UI harness. So it's a very simple testing page that we can use. And I'm going to walk you through how you can make your own tests now. But before I do that, let's actually go to our terminal, and I'm in the directory of this Dapp. And instead of typing, yarn start or, sudo yarn start like we were doing before, what we're going to do instead now is run yarn test. Now, you can run yarn test, but sometimes you'll have permission errors. And the way to, go about that is to type sudo, yarn test if you get like an e-access error. So I will run sudo yarn test just to be safe. So what you're going to see happening is it's going to look very similar to yarn start. You're going to see the Flow emulator starting. It's going to create all the accounts, but it's important to note that, when it does this, it's starting the emulator from a completely clean slate. And this is really helpful for our tests because we know that there's no, lingering kibble in any of the accounts. There's nothing weird going on. So we can start testing our values from square one. So you'll see that it deployed all the contracts to the accounts, and now it's running through the test. So what you're seeing now is it's saying signing for account and then an address. And the reason it's doing this is because if we go all the way to the beginning of our tests, where we see sets up two accounts, you'll see we're running 6 transactions here. And that's why right here, it showed 6 little hand emojis because it was signing 6 transactions. And as we go, you'll see that, look, we see a check mark that says sets up two accounts. And this means that sets up two accounts, which is right here, worked. And then look at our next test, was mints kibble into the admin account, blah, blah, blah. And you'll see there's a check mark, mints kibble into the admin account. And this means it worked. So if you see a check mark, this means your test worked. And also, it's important to note that if you see, like I'm running this project, assuming that all of your previous quests are working. If for some reason you run your sudo yarn test or your yarn test, and you don't see a check mark for one of them and you see an error, this means that one of your transactions or scripts or something is wrong with your contract from previous quests. So because of the fact that the Fast Floward Foundation that you downloaded already had working tests for you. And you should see 15 passing if everything works correctly. So For today, you're going to have to write 3 tests. And I'll scroll down to, or it might be, I think it might be 2 tests. But you'll scroll down to here where it says to do, implement this test. And you're going to have to fill in this test, which is removes a kitty item from sale. And if we keep scrolling down, you'll see another one that says implement this test. Checks both admin and user have correct balances after purchase. So you're only going to be implementing 2 tests today. So let's go through how we can actually set up a test to work properly. Okay, so let's use, actually, let's go all the way up to the beginning to make it very clear. So if we go to our second one, this mints kibble into the admin account and has the correct balance in the account. And we're running this test after, we set up all of our accounts to be able to handle kibble and kitty items in kitty items market. So you'll see that wherever we call a transaction, we put await dapplib.kibble_mint_tokens, and let's actually go to source dapplib, right? This is kibble. Let's search for kibble mint tokens, which is right here. And if you remember from the UI harness, we were passing in data.recipient and data.amount directly from the UI harness, right? But in this case, instead of passing in from the UI harness, we're going to get data.recipient and data.amount by passing in an object directly. So we're going to define a let test data 1. We're going to put an amount and a recipient. And in order to get addresses inside your test, you're going to use config.accounts. And remember, back from the day 3 video, what config.accounts means is inside your dap config, it's this array right here, accounts. So this is config.accounts at 0. This is config.accounts at 1. This is config.accounts at 2, etc. until all the way up to 4 here. So if you want to pass in an address, you can simply use, in your test, you can simply use dap_config.accounts. Now, if you don't want to get confused, what you can also do is go to your dap config. You can copy and paste this address, so like this 0x01c, and you can just put this instead. Both work completely fine, as long as you put in the right address that you want. So we're going to call kibble mint tokens with test data 1 object, and we're going to pass in our amount and recipient, and that's going to get put right here, right? Our data.recipient and data.amount. So instead of coming from the UI harness, it's coming from this object. Then we're going to call, so this was a, I'll comment here, this was a transaction. But what these two are is a script. So this looks a little different because we're setting our result to a couple variables here, one called result1 and one called result2. So if it's a transaction, you just put await dapplib, the name of the JavaScript function with your data. If it's a script, you set it equal to a variable. And the reason we're doing this is because we're going to assert that the return values, or these results, equal what we expect. So in here, we're going to call kibble mint tokens. We're going to mint 30 kibble into the into a config.accounts at 0. Then we're going to set up another object called test data 2, where the address is config.accounts at 0, and we're going to call kibble.getBalance, which will be in result 1. So config.accounts 0's kibble balance will be in result 1. And then we can check it by saying assert.equal result1, which is this variable, .result is equal to 30.0. And then this is an error message in case it doesn't work. But if we go to our terminal, you'll see that mints kibble into the admin account and has correct balance is a check mark. So we don't see any error messages here. So this is how you set up your tests inside the fast Floward tests. And let's just look at another example just in case. So let's go to maybe an easier one. Okay, let's go here. So this says it transfers kibble from the admin to the user. Okay, so in order to do this, if we're transferring kibble, we first want to transfer the tokens. So this is going to be a transaction, right? Because it just says await. And we're going to call kibble transfer tokens with test data 1. So let's go to kibble transfer tokens. Oh, it's right here. So we need a data.signer. This is the person giving away the tokens. The data.amount, the amount to give away. And the data.recipient, which is the person receiving. So in here, you'll see that test data 1, which is the object we're passing in, has a signer, amount, and recipient, which is exactly what we need to pass in. So the person giving away the tokens will be config.accounts at 0, and the person receiving will be config.accounts at 1. After we call this transaction, we're going to call a few scripts. We're going to get the balance of config.accounts at 0. Then we're going to get the balance of config.accounts at 1. And then we're also going to get the total supply, just because. And kibble get supply doesn't take in anything in the data object. Then we're going to assert that equal, that admin has now 20 kibble, because remember, it had 30 initially when we gave it up here. And then we're taking away 10, so it should have 20. And then the user, which is config.accounts at 1, should have 10 now. So this is an example of how to set up your tests. Now, for today's quest, like I said before, you're going to scroll down to your tests, and you're going to actually, implement this test. And what you're going to submit is just this file, so fastflowardtest.js. And what you want to do is, I left a bunch of hints for you here. And like for your transactions and dapplib quests before, I added comments of exactly what you're going to want to put here. And these are all one line. So for example, add test data 1, you're going to define a test data 1 object here to call this function. So you're going to have to figure out what parameters or what keys it'll need in order to pass in the correct data. Once you do this, and you also do this one, then what you're going to do is run sudo yarn test again, and make sure that you still see 15 passing. And if you do that, then you've correctly implemented your tests. So thank you so much for watching this video, and you've officially made it through the introduction to DappStarter. So congratulations to all of you. You did a fantastic job this week, and I'm so excited to introduce day 5 content tomorrow. And I'll see you then. Bye, everyone.